2:31.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the June 28, 2023 meeting of the Rappahannock-Rapidan Regional Commission. I am calling the meeting officially to order, and I ask everyone to stand. We have a flag. And do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I don't know about you all, but I have to reach all the way back to elementary school, to try to remember all the words. We're going to do things a little bit different and try to remove or to truncate some of the more procedural components so that we can spend more time with the meat of the meeting. So we're going to dispense with the roll call, but I will ask if we have a quorum.
We do have a quorum. Yes, sir.
All right. And then we have the agenda in front of us. I'd like to have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you. A second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. I'd like to welcome new Commissioner Janelle Downs from Fauquier County. Glad to have you here.
Thank you.
We're pleased to have you. We're going to have a consent agenda. So we have the minutes from the April 26th meeting and the year-to-date financial report. I'd like to have a motion to, what we'll do is we'll have a motion and a second to approve both items on the consent agenda, and then we'll have a discussion thereafter before we take a vote. So can I have a motion to approve the minutes and the year-to-date financial report?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second? Sure. Thank you. Any discussion, any questions? If not, I'll do a call to vote. Please indicate by saying aye. Those in favor, please indicate. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Executive Director's report.
Sure, thank you. I will be hopefully brief here. Highlights from the director's report. I again want to welcome Ms. Downs from Fauquier County. I'm looking forward to working with her. Her role as county administrator. As many of you know, in between the last commission meeting and this one, Paul McCullough, who had been on the board since 2011, his time with Fauquier County, and I was appreciative of an invite to be able to go to his retirement reception last week up in Warrington. So really nice, and he expressed his gratitude and thanks for everybody here that he worked with on the commission. I also wanted to offer some words from Mr. Crozier, Jim Crozier from Orange County, who has announced his pending resignation from the commission and from the Board of Supervisors in Orange County. So he unfortunately couldn't make it today. He's got some things to loose ends to tie up. But again, said the same thing, expressed his thanks for everybody here, enjoyed being on the commission, enjoyed working with all of you. I hope to be able to meet with him for lunch, in the next couple months before he departs from the region.
Do we get a chance to give him a brief at any point?
Well, it was supposed to be today, but unfortunately not. So I don't know that. I mean, I don't know that I could get him to come back to a commission just to get me.
When did you say Paul started on the regional commission?
2011 was when.
Jim, how about Jim? Same or?
Mr. Crozier was 2014.
14.
Yeah. We have a couple of positions. So we've got Liz Beeling is here today, and Liz has been our farm to school liaison for the past 2 years. This is the kind of starting that program. Liz kind of stepped in, was the first person to put in that position, and has helped to grow it beyond, I think, what we initially thought. She's been in and out of pretty much every school in the 5 counties over the last 2 years, most of them multiple times, doing taste test demonstrations and also helping with our food council and other work that we've done. Liz is moving on. She's going back to law school. She'll be attending Yale in just a couple of months, I guess, is when we'll start. So yeah, our loss is certainly Connecticut's gain for the next several years. And I just appreciate everything that Liz has done for us. We've had interviews for that position, hope to have a person in place in mid-July to fill that role and be prepared for this school year. We also have our AmeriCorps Vista position was open, and Matt Tobias, who's been serving in that role for the last year, has agreed to actually serve a second year, which is not terribly common, but for us will be great because it saves a loss of just knowledge that he's built up over the next year and the learning curve for somebody coming in. So I'm excited that he's going to stay on for another year with that. And then the other piece I wanted to talk about just real briefly was included in the packet was information on the Southeast Crescent Regional Commission. I received a letter last week from the chair of the Southeast Crescent Regional Commission, which is, Jennifer Fiburn Reed, and this is a new federal commission that spans a lot of Virginia, a lot of Virginia, a lot of Alabama, Florida, all the way down to Mississippi. Basically, it hugs the coasts of the Atlantic and then down to the Gulf Coast. And this is similar for somebody that may be aware of the Appalachian Regional Commission, which again follows sort of the western part of Virginia, but through what's historically been part of the Appalachia. And really what this is a federal commission that would potentially provide grant money for infrastructure, for some planning work, but largely is meant to help localities and local governments with investments and making targeted investments. So I share this with you because what the request that came out was as they start to build this Southeast Crescent Regional Commission capacity, they would like to work with regional organizations such as ours to provide some of that capacity and some of that connection to local governments. I sat on a webinar yesterday. I've had a couple other staff members participating just to make sure that we're all getting the same information. For us, as you might imagine, our region is pretty affluent, I guess is the best way to say it, but we have one of our counties, Orange County, actually is considered a transitional county, which means it would qualify for some grant programs potentially at a 50-50 match.
That sounds like kind of a polite way of referring to us,
well,
You're 50-50, Mr. Gordon.
That kind of.
if you were classified as what they call a distressed county, you get they have 80-20 grants where it's 80% federal. But honestly, most of the times our region doesn't qualify at all. And so I think what the other thing that Orange County qualifying opens up is if you have a multi-jurisdictional project, then you get to use you still get to qualify. So whereas a lot of times we wouldn't qualify, this gives us a little bit of a foot in the door. It's still very early, but I wanted to share with the commission this information and also let you know that we'll be going through in the next month or two. There will be a sort of a pre-application process just to indicate our interest, at which point they would likely come out and say, we have a little bit of money set aside to support our staff time to engage with you all and other stakeholders locally. But again, just wanted to share that with you and let you know that we continue to track it, even if it's not something immediately that's updated.
That is she related to Jim Clavin?
I don't know about that. She's from South Carolina, I think is
Columbia.
Yeah.
He's from South Carolina.
So maybe so. I don't want to say no, but
He's from Orange.
Is he with a Y or is he with an I?
Clavin.
Yeah.
Jennifer is a Y.
I thought.
Clavin, same like CLY. Same like, yeah.
The
I'll
other
check into
piece, the other piece of this that may come up and not initially right now, but down the line is that Virginia, to my knowledge, has not made an agreement to provide from the General Assembly to provide, I guess, pay in what was used for this organization. Most of the money is federal, but I think they want to see each state participate in. So if there is something where there's a need to have a legislative discussion where have conversations with legislators, I would so again transmit that to you if it makes sense and if it's the commission's interest. And those are really the main things I wanted to hit on the director's report today. So I'm happy to answer questions on other items if there are any.
Any questions? Before you go into I want to interrupt for just a second. I apologize. I didn't get to it earlier. I want to give two apologies. One for my casual wear. When you spend as much time as I do with 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, your dress decorum goes down rapidly. So I apologize. Secondly, I have to leave early, Mr. Coiner, so I will let you, if you don't mind, we need a roundtable. I've got to get back to the level members.
Sure.
All right. Patrick, back to you.
All right, so the next item is just staff updates and some old business. One thing I want to kind of go through with you, Shannon, we can pull a, we've got an extra chair.
I don't, I'm being destructive here. Oh,
You have a new list.
sorry.
So we will, item, and the next item is the PUC Housing Development Program, and just a brief update. And what I shared with you in April when I spoke with the commission, and the commission allocated additional funds to the Skyline Cap project, was that staff would come back at June and present a plan for how to use the rest of the unallocated money that was unallocated from the Rappahannock-Rapidan Community Services Project in December. So that's what I'm going to do today, and it's going to be very brief. The slides were included in your packet, but just so everybody can see, kind of a reminder of where we've been. Program started 2 years ago, July of 2021. If you recall, the commission, I think we were in Warrenton and had a presentation from Virginia Housing talking about the goals of the program. We signed on, and then in December 2021 received the proof of concept from 9 projects. And then received 7 full applications the month after that, in February 2022. February 22, the commission approved the allocation to 6 organizations, a total of 1.8 million. We had held back the other money to provide administration costs, just for us to have a ability to manage the program. And then in December, commission approved revised allocations to 5 organizations, and that was one where we pulled back the RRCS project. Simply because they were not going to be able to meet the deadlines based on their other funding availability that they had with other funding sources. So then lastly, 2 months ago in April, we did allocate an additional 10,000 to Skyline to complete their project in Madison. The other piece here, so here's the approved allocations from April. So you can see the 380,000 to Culpeper Community Development Corporation for Parkside apartments here in town of Culpeper, 380,000 to People Incorporated for their Lightfoot apartments again in the town. With 300,000 allocated to Fauquier Habitat for Humanity for projects in the Hayti Street neighborhood. 200,000 to Foothills Housing Corporation for the former Ben and Mary's building in Fauquier County, and then the Skyline Camp 250,000. So we have 290,000 unallocated, and based on our conversations with our partners, what staff is recommending and what we're bringing to you today is a proportional split of that funding to the 2 projects here in the town of Culpeper. Those are the largest projects in terms of units. They have the People Incorporated is a 60 unit project, and the CCDC project is 37 units. We recommend that they're actually both applying the funds to the same use. It's for tap fees for getting all those units hooked in to the town's utility system. So we felt like a recommended approval and a logical approach from us was proportional split of that money, which would result in a little bit more than 179,000 additional dollars going to the People Incorporated project, and a little bit more than $110,000 going into CCDC, with the other allocations to the other projects remaining the same.
Like a motion for approval?
Yeah, and just here's the summary of where we're at. You can see where that would be, but that is what we're recommending, and that would need a action from the commission.
All right, can I have a motion to approve the allocations as stated?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Right.
Any opposed? Thank you.
All right, next item is 50th anniversary update. So each underneath the packets at your seats, you've got just a 1-page flyer that tells you date, time, location for the 50th anniversary. Again, it's October 4th. It's be at Old House Winery here in Culpeper County, tentatively 5 to 8 p.m. And then a kind of a list of very, hopefully, not terribly inconvenient items that if we're asking for your support on in terms of making the 50th anniversary meeting a success. So that's really the one thing being RSVP. Yourself and the guests are comped and no charge for that at all. Second item is sharing that invitation, and once we send these invitations out, through email and other ways with your fellow board and council members, other stakeholders that you're partnered with in the region, state contacts, anybody that wants to be there. One other item was, if you're connected with past commissioners, inviting them as well, whether they're remain on boards or councils or not. I have a list of all the past commissioners I'm happy to share with anybody that needs, and that includes elected officials or administrators that have been on the commission as well. And then, honestly, if you have speaker ideas, would love to, the chair and I have had discussions about potential speakers and have a list kind of going, but if you have somebody specific that you'd like to hear or would like to have on the agenda, that would be great as well. And then the last item is one that we've sort of done off and on, but we've occasionally had door prizes, gift baskets, or just door prize giveaways from localities. That is entirely at your discretion if you're comfortable doing that and bringing something, or asking for a donation from somewhere. That's at your discretion. I don't want anyone to feel like they have to, but that's something we've done in the past, and we'd be happy to have available as well. We'll provide some from our commission programs that we have, but again.
When should, if we end up doing that, when should we get those to you?
Well, I mean, we've had in the past where they are brought to us at the meeting, but yeah, if you have items, even if it's something where you think you're going to do it, or you want to put something together, a basket from a county or a town, then you can just kind of give us a heads up and we'll go with that. But yeah, no, doesn't need to be to our office anytime.
And the location that you said is in Polka?
It is. It's Old House Vineyards, which is if you go Route 3 towards Fredericksburg, actually in Stevensburg, and very nice location. We've actually used it for not so much for commission stuff, but we've done some tourism events there. We've done some mobility management, digital mobility activities there. It's a great location. Let me move on to the next item. So the next item is the broadband projects, and this is more commission discussion. I don't know if anybody has updates on where you're at with your various broadband projects, or if you'd rather not talk about it.
We have a little update. They're going through and checking all of the polls. Actually, Timmons is going through for all points and checking all of the polls. They are planning on doing it over a period of 3 months that began, about 45 days ago, Joe? And that is the first step before they then improve the polls. And their plan is to run the fiber from November to February, which still seems incredulous to me, but we keep getting assured that that is the plan, and they're on track. And for the poll work, now that it actually is occurring, we are getting questions from constituents. They began in the eastern part of the county of Culpeper and are working west. And as a reminder, it's 4,300 homes that they're looking to have all fiber to the home by end of February.
Well, we're at least a year behind you, so keep watching you.
Madison's at the same pace as Rappahannock, so stand watching. Did not receive the latest Betty grant, disappointed, but we will keep at it. So folks in Etlin are pretty upset, but we'll keep applying and hopefully be successful.
Get some of this 1.5 billion BEAD money.
That's our next plan, is for the BEAD.
All right.
Right. Next item is the regional transportation districts and authorities discussion. The two items that were requested previously, or excuse me, one item that was requested previously was included here, and that's the FY, it's the motor vehicle dual fuels tax collected by locality. I will say VDOT was, it took some time, but they were able to provide that, and I feel like it's useful information. What I provided to you all in your packet was basically a list of throughout the state. I've got, the numbers for our localities separated out, and I would say the total collected in FY 22 on the 7.6 on fuel for cars and trucks, and 7.7 cents on diesel. Total in our region for FY 22 was about $9,417,000. That's about half of that, about 48% is collected in Fauquier County, about 22% in Culpeper County, just over 2 million in Culpeper. Orange is about 15 to 16%. Madison and Rappahannock Just there, Madison about 6% of the total, and Rappahannock about 3.6%. The usefulness there, the other piece that was included in your packet was an article from the Times Dispatch talking about the Central Virginia Transportation Authority, and Mr. Voorhees from Orange County had shared that with me, just kind of giving an example of the way that they have developed. And theirs is a little bit different. The article sort of outlines it pretty well, but the Central Virginia Transportation Authority is set up to where they put 50% of the funds that come in go back to the localities to apply to local projects, and then 50% is allocated. 15% is actually allocated to transit provider, Greater Richmond Transit Company, and 35% to regional projects that the authority agrees on. And so that sort of that's different than like Northern Virginia or Hampton Roads, where it's entirely at a regional level. And I think that has, as the article outlined, it really got some buy-in from some of the counties that made previously and said, well, this isn't really going to benefit us at all. So that's certainly a model to follow. I've got those numbers that would, be used at their funding mechanism. I guess what I would say, I'm happy to kind of talk through any information if there are questions, but also I'm seeking sort of guidance from the commission as to, what's the desire to continue to research this or to continue to pursue any, further discussion along those lines would be beneficial to staff as far as allocating right.
I have also reached out to the Culpeper's representatives, Delegate Freitas and Weber, and Senator Reeves. And it occurs to me that there could be perhaps two solutions to this. One would be what Central Virginia Transportation Authority did, because that was an efficient way to get some of the money back to the localities. But another perhaps could be if we could just get them to change the state code where the state remits the money directly to the localities. If we did that, we wouldn't need an authority. We get the money and it could go towards the projects that we would like proportionately. Early days there, but I'm attempting to get their feedback on what the General Assembly and Senate and Governor's office would think on making that change. So, but getting it back directly probably be even better than having another authority, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would say I appreciate that because the bulk of the money that goes to the Richmond for the Central Virginia Transportation Authority is not through the fuels tax, it's through their 11% sales tax, which I think is, obviously very much it might be powerful in Richmond, but probably not as much here, at least based on my understanding. And that's the other piece. The money's in that spreadsheet. Where they go now is into the Smart Scale, into the Highway Construction District program. So they're available for the localities, but you have really no local control over, how those monies are spent other than buying these Smart Scale.
Otherwise, seeing the numbers, it was a little surprising. Culpeper sells a lot less gas than I thought. But when you think about it, Fauquier sells a lot more because they got a lot more gas stations getting up by 66. And Madison sells a surprising amount relative to Culpeper. I think what Madison was 1.5 or something to Culpeper's 2.2.
All the sheets that are clean up.
29
Yeah.
doesn't affect Culpeper at all, with gas stations. It does Madison.
It does quite.
Bypasses gas stations.
Culpeper and its whatever we want to call it, I wouldn't say wisdom, decided to not allow gas stations in a lot of Culpeper County along 29 for many, many years, including that.
I noticed that the statistics are during the height of COVID, the summer of 21 on, so the likelihood is that the numbers will increase.
And that was, in the posited in the article, I'm thinking of the staff members at the authority of, and those numbers, I think the number in the article is slightly different than the number in the spreadsheet, but it was
Very similar, 49.6 to 50.2, I think. And
gave me that confidence. Okay, we're talking about the same things here. They're not making it up with some other source or anything like that, but that was that, we increased.
All right. Any other discussion? Not? Over the budget.
All right, so the budget is included. Sure. Budget was presented in April. And just wanted to highlight there was only one minor change on the expense side. The revenues remain the same as presented in April. slight change on the expense side was just we had looked at our insurance policies, had some conversations with Virginia Risk Bearing Association, and moved a couple of items into our current policy with Versa, and also added on a cybersecurity insurance rider that we've been looking at for quite a while. I know most of you have probably dug into that much more than we had Virginia, but there's been enough shared and enough times where people have said, yeah, this saved us in a situation that they didn't really have control over to add that on. So that netted an additional $700 into the insurance expenses, which we shifted from health and dental insurance. So that's the only change from April. Again, the highlights are we're increasing from in the current year's budget of 1.7 million to about 2.5 million, largely with spending through the housing development program and some of our other grant programs that are moving through next year with just larger amounts. So. Again, happy to answer questions. I didn't have much in between the April meeting and now from any commissioners, but again.
Patrick, I think it's very consistent. I looked at it closely the last few days. I think it's very consistent. The numbers are up because of what you said. The programs. I don't have any questions, but I pretty much looked at every line item. I'm very comfortable with it. I would move to approve, and assuming I get a second, continue any other discussion after that. To the motion.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion? No.
For clarity, the per capita expected contribution, since staying at 83.
It is, and that's,
Right.
I appreciate that question, Mr. Underwood. That is set in usually at the August meeting, is when we have that discussion, just so because the first local application goes in usually September to Fauquier County. So that will be a discussion in August, the 80%.
Great.
All right, if there's no other discussion, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the budget, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
All right. We managed to get through the business items. So as discussed in April with the commission, I've given you periodic updates on the process of our comprehensive economic development strategy, our SEDS planning work, and as shared in April, we were able to get the calendars to match up and get a site visit with our consultants, Des Moines associates. So we have Alex Strammer and Dan Gunderson here with us today from Des Moines, and just by way of kind of brief, summary remarks from myself, they've been, we got under contract back in January, and so they've been really digging into data, some of which they'll talk through today. I think as we talked about in April, my thought here for this sort of facilitated discussion would be not only to bring you all up to date on where we are in terms of the process and the types of information they've been able to collect, but also start to get the commission's input on strategies and directions, not just for your localities, but also for the commission in terms of our role. So again, very pleased that it worked out. We were able to get Alex and Dan here for this meeting, and then tomorrow morning we have a Go Virginia Region 9 Council meeting in Warrenton that they're also going to be at to meet with that group. So the timing really worked out really well. So yeah, happy to have them here, and I will turn it over to them and pull their presentation out.
Well, thank you, Patrick. Mr. Chair and commissioners, thank you for carving out some time for us today to be able to talk to you about comprehensive economic development strategy. What we're going to do today is just not assume that everybody is on the same page with what a SEDS is. Although you've been hearing the reports about it, you have confidence in Des Moines and bringing us on board to help develop it. We want to give some basics, and then we're going to get deep into specifics about what a SEDS is all about and what we're doing presently. We're going to talk about the value to the region of having the SEDS, and then get into some data highlights. But really what we want is to have this be a conversation, to hear from you, get your thoughts and get your ideas. I should mention as well that in addition to my being here and Alex, we have Jordan Bogey is on the phone as well. He could not be here today, but he is the project manager for the region. And he's been dealing with staff on a near daily basis. So with that, any questions about what we'd like to do today, or is this consistent with what you thought would happen? Okay, well, let's get into it. If you have questions, please just stop me along the way. Let's begin at ground zero as to what a comprehensive economic development strategy is. As you know, this is a federal designation, a federal program established by the Economic Development Administration of the U.S. Department of Commerce. It's been around since the Great Society days of the 1960s, and almost as long as regional planning commissions. And it was an attempt by the federal government to help, at the time, help more rural communities develop capacity in response to a lot of federal initiatives that were helping urban communities back in the day. The thought was, how can we more in a coordinated fashion help the rural communities? Soon became evident that that would be very difficult to do with so many thousands of little towns and communities, that it'd be much easier to work as regions and to work along the regional planning commission guidelines. And that's how, although the planning commissions were not economic development entities, they became involved in this economic development distribution of funds, which continues to this day. The SEDS over the years have been kind of popular and then out of, not as popular, but never more so than during COVID, when the federal government had to push a lot of money through the pipeline. If you had a SEDS, if you were designated as an economic development district on top of that, in the very early days of the CARES Act money, you could have received $400,000 off the bat to capitalize a revolving loan fund. That woke up a lot of communities. Why don't we have a SEDS? Why aren't we organized in this way? So the SEDS has never been more popular. A lot of the work that we do at Camoin around the country is helping communities work through this process. We are currently working, as you know, not only with this region, but with the Thomas Jefferson Regional Planning Commission as well. They're jointly working at the same time. And as you may recall, there's an element to this work that will bring us together to see if there are super regional strategies that can be developed to leverage even more resources and capacity for the region. So as we develop our strategies, we're looking at those kinds of linkages. Now, the federal government, I mentioned that we've been at this long enough. We also know how they review the SEDS for approval. We know the regional administrators across the country, and we know they're all going through the same process. And there are 7 boxes internally that they are going to check as they review each SEDS. And I'd like to just mention them. Number 1 is equity. Does the strategy speak to economic equity throughout the region? Are all residents benefiting from the strategies that are included? Second, recovery and resilience. Is the region recovering from any economic, social, natural disasters or bumps or bruises that it may have sustained or is currently sustaining? And what is its capacity for resilience? Has it thought through tomorrow? You may have a recommendation in your SEDS that is spot on, but it may not have anticipated what could happen. And so as we develop strategies, we're always looking at the what ifs. Is this recommendation going to hold water over time? And that's really what resilience is all about. Third, workforce. Is it aligning with the workforce needs, where the people are, whether they'll be prepared for the jobs of tomorrow? Fourth, manufacturing. Manufacturing has been a mainstay, and thank goodness we've stuck with it. The federal government has stuck with it.
as a priority. Manufacturing needs to be a priority in America, and no more so now is that focus there as well, and that is good too. So we'll be looking at what is this strategy speaking to in terms of manufacturing. 5, tech-based economic development. What is the effect on the jobs of today with the technology and the movement? Next, environmentally sustainable development. Is it taking into consideration not just development for development's sake, but what is the impact to the environment and to the communities in which these projects may be located? Next, exports and FDI. That is another box that they're going to check. Are you connected to the global economy, and how? And are the companies understanding of the markets around the world in which to export their products, their goods, or their services? And then finally, this was just added in the last 60 days. EDA has received a mandate on high that these sets must address climate change, the impact of the climate on different regions in their economies. So those are some of the 7 big things that we know inside EDA. When they receive this says, will it address those 7? And we will assure you that it will. We'll bring that out in our planning processes. Really what it is it's a regional approach. It has to be grounded in data you've received or you've heard about the data that we've already presented. We'll be building on that data as we move along. It is a 5-year time frame. So we're looking not just for things that can be done within 5 years, but accomplishments that can be made on long-term goals in the next 5 years. What can be done now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now? How will we move the ball down the field? It is a great opportunity to come together, to look at what's been done. A lot of different kinds of strategies are out there. This is an attempt to integrate those strategies. And sometimes we don't need to, redesign the wheel. We simply need to make sure that good ideas are not being dismissed, but they're being integrated into this quote unquote comprehensive strategy. The other thing about a comprehensive economic development strategy is it's not traditional economic development. Traditional economic development would say, what kind of project can I bring forward in my community that is going to create jobs and that is going to leverage private investment? What's the capital? What's the CapEx needed for this? That's traditional economic development. In a comprehensive economic development strategy, you're looking at all of those inputs to economic prosperity. And you're looking at whether workers can afford the housing, whether the community you're investing in the community such that you're thinking about its attractiveness, not only for tourism, but for the residents and for the workers who are growing up or the young people who are growing up in the community. Are they going to be able to stay? Do they want to stay? Do they find what they are looking for within the community? That's a much more comprehensive view of it. It pulls in education, and it may even include some health services and social services. Very comprehensive. Keep that in mind as well. And the economic strategy is also an attempt to be able to target some resources, to be able to say we can't do everything. What over the next 5 years should be our priorities? So that is what the SEDS is all about. Here is an example of what it might look like at the end of the day in terms of the paper, the strategy itself. This is one that I am working on currently. We are in the very final stages. This is for the Hartford, Connecticut region. And you can see there, we worked with the SEDS committee and came up with these 5 goals. Yours will be very different. And that's the beauty of a SEDS, is it's very particular to the community. No 2 communities, no 2 regions are alike. That's a given. And so too should be the goals and the initiatives. I think what's most interesting about this one is, look at goal 5, restructure the implementation framework. They've been doing SEDS for years. And when we came in and we began, we said, what's working and what's not? They said, well, we've developed beautiful SEDS, but it never seems to be implemented. Why is that? Because there was no staff within the regional planning group that was designated to do it. They all assumed that all the stakeholders would do their part and carry it forward. But at the end of the day, never quite happened that way. And so here they're completely restructuring that. They're dedicating an individual. They're putting in place chairs of their SEDS committee that are from the business community who are going to demand accountability and management control. And that's a big deal for them. But anyway, that's what it looks like. And then it gets down into much more detail as to, you know, who's going to be the lead, who are the partners, and even where we'll have a budget associated with that as well.
We get a copy of your presentation.
Of this? Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Everything that we do is yours. I'm going to turn it over to Alex. Alex is now going to get into, she's the brains behind this. So she's going to get into the data because I'll get in trouble when I start talking facts. She's going to give it to you. Go for it.
So yes, we'll get the presentation out right after this. And hello, everyone. Just again, Alex Tranmer from Moyne Associates. Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong, the group has received the data economic base, I guess.
Probably in one of the various emails I've sent, I would, as I wanted to do, don't vouch for everybody having dug into the 80-some pages, but yeah.
Okay, just so I know sort of familiarity and things. So again, just big picture where we're at with this whole endeavor. Really just getting into some of the stakeholder engagement and on the ground work. We're going to hit all 5 counties of the region over the next couple of days. We were just with some of the Orange County folks right before this, and Culpeper's right after this. So, you know, we, like Patrick said, we've got a lot of data to run through today, plenty more available in this data report. What we wanted to focus on, though, while we're in the region is really a conversation and really to look between the lines of the data. You know, it's our foundation. It gives us a starting point, but we know that that data lags, that, you know, the things that are happening in your communities are real, and we need to really feel and hear what's happening. So we'll make sure our contact information is passed along. This is really just the beginning of the conversation. We'll go through the end of the year into the beginning of next year before all of this is wrapped up. So really plenty of time to sink into not only the data, but what's happening on the ground as well. So just in terms of how are we using the data, we've got, again, from demographic to labor market to workforce to the agricultural census, right? We've got a lot of data in front of us, but how are we going to use it? A couple different ways, again, very high level at this point, but thinking about who lives in the region, right? What does that look like? Is it different than 10 years ago? Is it going to be different in another 10 years? What is the age distribution, the family composition? Are households growing or shrinking? That can tell us about the age of the community, right? Whether a household is shrinking or growing. So all of those little pieces become part of the story. In terms of the economy, right, we're obviously looking at a job creation, job growth, looking at the occupations that fuel those jobs, those industries, I should say, looking at the target industries. We know that Go Virginia has 4 or 5 target industries established, and so we've already got a good framework to work within, but that's obviously going to be different for an Orange County or a Culpeper County, right? There's going to be nuances for each of those counties, and so we've got this regional framework that we really need to understand how each of the counties plays into each of those industries. Lastly, real estate. In order for companies to grow, expand from within the county, to be attracted into the county, right? They've got to have some place to go. That's going to look different for lots of different industries, whether you're talking industrial, manufacturing, warehousing, logistics, maybe data centers, all the way down to a Main Street business. You know, what does a new retailer need? And so we really got to understand, again, across the entire region, where are there pockets of development, pockets of opportunity, and ultimately, how do we align where there's opportunity in terms of real estate and what the opportunities are? So those are some of the things that we're trying to connect when you see some of the data in front of you and what we'll go through today. Those are the types of questions that we're trying to answer throughout this process. So, big picture takeaways, just to sort of hit on today. Overall, and you know, again, this is probably not necessarily a surprise, but right, just to have that data behind the perception is really important. So, right, population and employment growing pretty consistently across the region within the last 10 years. Obviously, there's nuances between the counties where that growth is centered and where maybe there's a lack of growth. Really just important to keep in mind that although we are looking at this regional level, we understand that there's going to be things that apply to certain locations that don't apply to other locations. And so this is not meant to be, you know, here's a plan, it applies to all of you the same. It's certainly not, you know, that is not the intention and not what is going to be overall impactful to the economy as well. In terms of industry, agriculture, clearly a legacy industry in the region, but we've got some pockets of things growing that you'll see in some of the slides, all the way from computer software design to food and beverage manufacturing and wood product manufacturing. So, right, all related to some of those legacy industries, but you're seeing growth in manufacturing and professional scientific services. So interesting to dig more into that. And then we looked at commute patterns. So for the region as a whole, it's about 180,000 or so in terms of population. About 2/3 of that, of the working age population, I should say, is commuting outside of these 5 counties for work. So, you know, there's not necessarily a magic ratio when we talk about, you know, working and living in the community versus commuting out, but just something to keep in mind in terms of, right, where your talent and skill is commuting to in the morning and whether that could be done perhaps within the community. All right, that might be a little small, but big picture takeaways in terms of population change. The red box there is circled around the region. Oh, that's a little bit better. So you can see in the last 10 years, so that's between the censuses 2010 to 2020, the population for the county or the region as a whole, I should say, grew by 10%. And then the different bars there you can see are the different counties, and then Virginia and the US as well, just for comparison's sake. So we've really seen the regional growth outpace both the state and the US, but you can really see that span across the different counties. So all the way from Rappahannock at 2% to Culpeper at 12%, which I'm sure has been felt in communities, right, with housing developments and building permits and applications. Just put some facts and figures behind that. All right, so jumping to employment then, right, we want to look at both what's happening in terms of population and employment. You see the range here as well. Let's see, it's not circled in this one, but Rappahannock-Rapidan regions, that navy blue bar there, 1.2%. So over the last, this is a different time frame, over the last 5 years, for the region as a whole, jobs have increased by about just over 1%. But again, you can see that span all the way from Orange County at the bottom to Culpeper County at the top. I should say Orange County, it says 0. There is growth there. It was just relative to the percentage, it does not. It went up many tenths of a percent, but there is job growth there.
Isn't this CAGR?
That's
Compound annual growth rate, not 5 year.
This is the growth over the 5 years, not compound, not annually.
Okay, so you're saying over 5 years in the entire state of Virginia, employment growth grew 1.3%.
That is what I intend to show. However, now that you're saying that. These do look like. The annual,
They look like cat.
Annual.
yeah. Yeah, the annual rates.
It also goes right around COVID.
It does, that's why I was asking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's what's going on.
wild swing in between or
Mhm.
across those 5 years. But fair point to double check that. And many more sort of iterations of this in the actual report as well.
Yeah, because the unemployment rate is roughly the same now as it was in 17. It went much lower, it then went much higher, and it's back to roughly where it is. You have the population growth that you just had on the previous slide. So unless workforce participation or age is changing dramatically,
Right,
this would be closer to compounding.
yeah. I will double check that before we get these slides out so that it reflects
Okay.
whether it is annual or it's capturing some of the wild market changes. All right, this one is gonna be, let me just talk through sort of what we're looking at here. So the way, and I'm sure many of you have dealt with this in some of your own work, but in terms of how industries are classified, they are classified in NAICS codes. Don't make me say the acronym. NAICS codes. And start at 2 digits and go to 6 digits. So 2 digits being very broad, accommodations down to something more specific, like hotels and motels. So what we're looking at here is the 2-digit NAICS codes for the entire 5-county region. So things like manufacturing, educational services, accommodation of food, services, retail trade, those big industry categories. What you're seeing on your right upper quadrant, those are leading industries. Those are the ones that are in the green color. So those are ones that have had job growth in the last 5 years, and those that have a high location quotient. In other words, they're very concentrated in the region. They're very specialized. Just below that in the blue is going to be your emerging industries. So ones that maybe are not as concentrated, they maybe don't have quite as much of a specialty in the region, but they are growing and they're growing fast. And those are the two that we are keeping an eye on, those leading and emerging industries. On the left-hand side there in the yellow, you see maturing. So that's where agriculture pops up, right? It's very concentrated. So it's almost 4 times more concentrated in this region than anywhere across the country, which, right, I think makes sense. And then in that bottom left quadrant there, in the sort of purplish color, those are the lagging industries. So ones that really are not a specialty to the region necessarily, and we're actually seeing job decreases in those industries. A lot of sort of, there's not maybe one conclusion to draw from this. I think it's a starting point to tell us what's happening in each of these industries. Just to sort of zoom in on the leading and emerging. Again, these are the ones that I think we're interested in terms of diving deeper into where this growth is centered. What has generated this growth over the last 5 years, and whether it's something that's continued to be anticipated, or whether it was really perhaps a moment in time that produced some of this growth. So again, on the leading industries, so the top subsectors there that you can see in the bottom half of that rectangle, I think just to point out that many of those are connected to population growth, right? They're service-based, whether it's motor vehicle parts and dealers, supermarkets, general merchandise stores, or the constructing of buildings or related things, right? That's all a function of population growth. So that population growth has fueled some of these service sectors. And then on the other side in the blue, the emerging, that's where you start to see some of the specialties in the region. So obviously the wineries and wood products, both connected to the strong agricultural presence in the region. And then also under professional and scientific, some of that computer system design. We got a few more services there, lawyers and veterinarian's office. Just sort of interesting to maybe take a little bit of a different perspective or spin on some of the industries that are growing in the area. Last piece of data here is just the commuting data that I was referring to. So on the left-hand side there, you see the largest commuter destination. So, right, some of that is inter-region commuting, some of it is commuting out of the region further north. Just to sort of walk through what the image is, the center of that Venn diagram, that is the proportion of workers that live and work in the 5-county region. So that's about 26,000 people, or about 34% of the total working population. The biggest takeaway is that the region is a net exporter of jobs. So more people are leaving on a daily basis than are coming in for jobs.
I have a question.
Yeah, of course.
You considered somebody going from Fauquier County to Fairfax? Independent, where are they all going to Washington? Or is there any cross? I know a lot of people who work in Orange and live in Colorado.
Right, so that would be captured in terms of where they are going. If they wouldn't be,
Okay.
that would be counted as in-region commuting, not
In-region.
commuting out of the
Okay.
region, yeah. Because there's plenty of that happens
Right.
too, right? Okay, that is a very quick overview. Let me get a check on time. Okay. Exactly where we want to be. I'll make sure that the slides get out, that the full data report gets out. All of this is in more detail at the county and town level as well. We want this data to be useful and applicable to all of your communities as well. So don't hesitate to reach out with any questions. We really view this data as a toolbox and a resource for all of you. So not just a static sort of data document. Any initial questions on that data before we go into a bit of a discussion here?
What are your sources?
Great question. So we use a variety of public and proprietary sources. So anything from the latest releases from census, the decennial census, the American Community Survey, being the public sources sort of most used. And then in addition to the proprietary sources, we subscribe to Lightcast, formerly MZ, some people might know that. Really the best in class in terms of labor market data, workforce data, and more recently jobs postings data as well. The last one to add there would be Esri Business Analyst. Helps us put together things geographically. Puts a geographical component behind a lot of the data. Those are the highlights. All right, so I think, Patrick, we've got until about 2:15 set aside for this?
Yeah.
Okay. I think the best way. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got a couple of questions here. I'm going to take some creative license and adjust these questions. And I want to focus on just one. And maybe I think the best way to do it is just going to be a round robin, just to make sure that everyone is heard. So take a second. I want to focus on a adapted portion of that last question. We talked about job growth, population growth, right? That obviously has pressures on the community. It has positive benefits, but it can also have pressures and implications on the community. And I'm wondering for everyone at this table, and I anticipate a different answer from everyone, what does optimal economic growth look like for your community? So sustainable could be another way to say that, but I mean in the broadest sense, optimal economic growth. So, that could mean, in some cases, it could mean data centers, and in some cases, it could mean very limited development altogether. It could mean just growth on main streets. There's no wrong or right answer to this question, so that's the best part. But think about for your community, for your constituents, what is your optimal level? Say within the time frame of this plan, 5 years. What's the optimal level of economic growth? What does that look like to you and your community?
We maximize per capita net income along with the per capita savings rate.
So really building personal household.
Yeah, economic development is, well, and income, because you can choose to spend it rather than save it. That's why I put both the income and the savings, because we have a community that in some cases is aging. They're choosing to live comfortably and save less. That's perfectly acceptable also.
Right, so less on the personal side, but the ability to increase.
Right,
Net
and you
income,
measure it by metrics. The easiest metric is dollars.
Absolutely. What about for anyone else? A similar sort of, down to the.
Well, I represent Warrenton.
Mhm.
It's a town that has only grown a handful of people in the last 10 years.
Mhm.
And 10,000 people 10 years ago, about 10,000 people now. And a significant portion of Warrenton likes to keep it at 10,000 people. So sustainable economic growth, there are those who don't.
Meaning,
Dynamics that we are
Right.
living with in terms of the vision of the town, which I think all of us need to draw back from. The shared vision of where you want to go and what you want to see. It determines what economic growth means for a community. Does it just mean more jobs, or does it mean better housing? Does it mean all kinds of it's a matrix.
Mhm.
So for us, it would be to be able to sustain and improve the quality of life for our residents and our businesses. And I think that's a general view, but without necessarily falling into the old mantra that you have to grow to die, or if you don't grow, you die.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a significant portion in our community who feels that you don't have to grow in terms of, let's say, GDP or other factors to create a healthy local economic environment.
Mhm. Maybe stability.
Stability, but certainly we need improvements across the board in terms of attracting businesses in the community, maintaining them, sustaining them, particularly in the area of restaurants, since that's a major revenue source for the town.
Yeah.
But in general, is to build out and maximize what we already have,
Okay.
rather than necessarily, we've gone through a boundary line adjustment process, which was eventually we didn't pursue, because the observation was the town ought to take care of its own first before it decides it needs to annex in order to sustain some other vision that isn't consistent with what the residents want.
It almost sounds like a definition for resilience.
Right.
You don't want to die. You want to grow to such an extent that it is comfortable, but not so
Right.
much change.
Right, I mean, we're sort of a strong towns advocate in that sense. We don't want to outstrip our ability, for example, in terms of residential development, in terms of our water and sewer capacity. And to get ourselves into, but we need to be in more balance in our town in terms of our revenue sources as well as our future tax requirements. But the idea is that just to grow meets a lot of resistance. And so that's where we are. I would say that's a fair representation.
And does the data suggest that that's possible, given the demographics of aging of the population? Is it saying, we might have a challenge here if we can't backfill with the right?
Well, we went through a very significant 5-year comprehensive plan where they analyzed a lot of these issues, realizing some of the sources you are. The decision was, yes, we have an aging population, but it's not overwhelmingly, it's not an overwhelming concern, but we need younger workforce, housing, and we need a broader sense that we're keeping our own employees, for example, in Warrenton rather than have to commute somewhere else.
Well, any other thoughts, either at the town, county, or from both?
Well, you'll talk to Rappahannock tomorrow, but I think tomorrow.
Yeah.
Warrenton's kind of penned in, I don't have a lot of room to grow. We have a ton of room to grow.
Mhm.
But our model is to not grow at all. And you don't say that word. You don't say development, you don't say growth. Those are bad things. And you'll learn a little more about that. But I think adaptive reuse or there's cycles of use and application of economic activity. And so finding ways to adaptively cycle through, it was all about apples if you go back far enough. And now we're doing our last comp plan and we're looking at ag products or production, and the grapes have passed the apples, right? The apples are going down, the grapes are going up, and I don't know what's next, but I think we've got our fill of grapes at this point in time. But there's a lot of infrastructure out there that could be tapped for some adaptive reuse, and we are aging. If you look at the data,
Population.
very old, and we do struggle with affordable housing, but nobody has an interest to really tackle it in an active way through multi-family housing or something like that.
Mhm. And does the adaptive reuse apply to structures as well in terms of maybe not housing or multi-family housing, but in terms of maybe new homes for businesses or?
Yeah, probably.
Mhm.
Although, we turned down a rezoning that was gonna change a opportunity from, I think, 5 homes to 11 homes, because it was just ridiculous.
Mhm. So, yeah, growth development. Not the right ways to characterize Rappahannock's economic vision.
Right.
Be maximizing the infrastructure or existing structures that are there.
Yeah, I think there's some nearsightedness to it all, and people have observed change over time, and it's predictable results of actions that were taken in the 80s, but so far, I guess people are comfortable with it.
The culture is still, that's still where the culture is,
It's not unified, but
yeah, sure, yeah.
And I think we're
Yeah.
after Paul Pepper today. A little bit off, piggyback off Gary, we're kind of in between that. Maybe not no growth, but green is not part of this region, but you'll constantly becomes a warming. We don't want to be green. We don't want all these little stops. So I would say controlled and complementary growth for us. Controlled from one of the things that's in my mind, we're going to be going through some upgrades, smaller upgrades to our already small wastewater and water system. So it's already a limitation there of what can be developed either in the town of Madison or the county of Madison. So that would be kind of that, why I use that word controlled. Housing, I'm not sure. Folks talk about affordable housing, that comes up, all these people define, but tell me what's your definition. Folks say they want it, and then sometimes you hear stigma and stuff that comes with that as well. We have, I think one of the recent rezonings had some storage units. It was mixed development, but storage units, some components of apartments, and a commercial pad. Well, now that the clear cutting is going on, what is this? Oh my goodness, folks are debating Madison County, but control growth from a standpoint of utilities, not letting certain folks buy up just vast amounts of EDUs or ERC, whatever your metric is. On the complementary side, I think it goes to some of the things you heard here earlier, supporting we can have Madison County between agricultural and forestry, or some of our, if not the biggest industries. We have wineries popped up as well. Let's see if you can expand. I'm going to keep at it until they run me out of town, but I'd love to see a hydroponic farm established. I know Culpeper has one. There was an announcement in Louisa County recently. So it's ways to complement what you already have, or what you claim to be, because you gotta have some growth. Just no business, no housing, you're gonna keep doing it off the back of the property with your real estate, and it's not a successful model. At least if you're not trying to keep some of those larger tract of lands, which will eventually be developed and split up. If folks can't afford to stay there, the culture and the thought process of development will change.
With the hydroponics, is that building on sort of the next generation of ag and forestry, what you're.
You see a lot of it. I mean, you can do it vertically. I think they do it in Indiana. I was prior days in Colorado County. I've seen it in the horizontal model, but it's a market.
Yeah.
Whether it's doesn't have to go up, 81 or some of these other places that can stay within Virginia, but if you're an agricultural community, we have a good cattle presence. We kind of go up to number 1 or below that, our cattle exchange. But other than that, we're a farming community. We don't have a tractor dealership. Our co-op barely surviving. So it just makes you think, okay, we're agriculture. What are we doing to complement that?
All right, I just want to be cognizant of time here.
Jim still have some more around too. Sure.
Here.
We're on week 6 of this job. I'm gonna listen and learn today. Okay.
Anyone else?
Orange just proved a bunch of growth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Orange is having growth problems.
What?
Orange approved more than 3,000 homes in the last 3 months.
All that eastern.
Yeah,
Oh,
wilderness.
I'd say for the town of Culpeper, kind of like Goldilocks,
Mhm.
not too hot, not too cold, just right. Nice. I'm sure you talked to Paige, so you
Right.
probably heard a few of her opinions. She usually has some.
Just after this, actually, is
Okay.
where we're headed, yeah.
But, smart growth, I don't know, I would classify that more as selective. Growth or selective businesses, just because they knock on the door, don't let them in. But pick ones that will actually end up being a benefit for the community, short term and long term.
Right,
Um,
like complementary to what already exists, building on the legacy that's there. And. Meeting the needs
and I
of the
think
community.
improving resilience, like with farming,
Mhm.
some of the traditional farming isn't overly resilient right now, but you
Mm,
can add wineries or.
Agritourism, or, yeah.
No, that on a regional basis, there have been several opportunities for us regionally to come together to support projects in other localities. And I think our perspective in Rappahannock is that we're all for the growth in Culpeper and Fauquier. Madison too, but it's a little harder to get to. Put all the jobs there and our people will find the job there. You can come visit when you want to, breathe fresh air.
Just go home in the evening.
Right.
Well, you still don't have a stoplight. So
We do not,
probably had
nor a
it.
grocery store, nor a.
Yeah, yeah.
And you'll send us your trash. too, right?
That's right. That's going to Page County, not John. He doesn't get any more, it goes to Page
Oh,
County.
does it?
Yeah.
Well, I want to be, keep us on schedule, so I want to just, next steps is really brief, so if there's anything else that anyone wanted to add. While we're here.
I could say just two
Yeah.
things real
Yeah.
quick, Alex. One is and it came out a little bit in the conversation here, which I appreciate. I think the differences between towns and counties in the region, I think is something that can be, it's not they're different, so we've got to compete or anything like that, but I just think the strategies that are going to come out are going to be different for those. So that's not even to say that all the towns are the same. I mean, I think Culpeper is 20,000 in population. We've got the chair from the town of Washington of population less than 100, but I think that's something that we can keep an eye on in anything that we do.
Scale. Yeah.
Yeah, and the types of activities that they're willing to take on
Yeah.
in terms of infrastructure and things like that. And I think the other one is the smart growth piece. The discussion there is exactly right. I think it's also sort of tied into some of the things that have been done. And I think pretty much every jurisdiction and region has has made an effort at some of the quality of life type, whether it's recreation opportunities or other things, some of the investments that have been ongoing that, may not be thought of as, oh, this is economic development, but are building that support for some of the other opportunities that they come along.
Right.
Yeah, we have one more. Gentleman with the glasses.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was gonna ask you a question. What do you see are the assets that you need for economic growth? As I see it, where we are, I'm in the town of Orange, we're in Orange County.
Yeah,
Okay. Now, but Orange County has a much higher median household income than the town does. That makes a significant difference into what is willing to come there, as well as the volume. Suppose you want a new grocery store there, which I've heard since I've been there. Okay, it just doesn't meet the qualifications for somebody to come there. It just doesn't. So how do you, what do you see would be the assets that a town needs, a town versus the county, to actually be able to grow?
yeah. But whenever I'm asked this, I was in economic development as a practitioner for 25 years or so, including, some of you may remember a few years back, leading VEDP, Virginia Economic Development Partnership. But I've done that elsewhere around the country, and I characterized it as the 6 I's. You need to meet the fundamentals of economic prosperity before you can grow, and before you can develop upon that growth. And what are those, fundamentals? It really has to do with your human assets, your people, and the education. And I call that the intellectual capital. Are they prepared for the future? Is your school system, are your higher education systems plugged into that, or are they into the systems, whether they be within the community or without? It really begins there. Another I, if you will, of fundamental economic prosperity, infrastructure. How good is that infrastructure? Are you maintaining it, from roads, bridges, broadband, airports, you name it? There's a lot of different ways. Infrastructure has always been the fundamental for economic development and economic growth. So, you have the intellectual capital, the infrastructure. There's another element, and I call it the interest. Is your community does it have something that the residents really are proud of, that they want to be there, and that others in the future will want to be there as well? If you do, you can really build on that for tourism, but you have to have it for your own residents as well. Most people are very proud of their homes and their communities, but not if that quality of life, we were mentioning quality of life a little earlier, not if that quality of life falls beyond a certain standard. So everybody, you have to have that. Another thing is the capital, and I call it investment. Is the capital within the community, whether it's the tax base, or whether it's private lending, commercial lending, is there a flow of investments, or are you broke? Are you just not generating that wealth within your community? Another thing that many communities, even rural communities, have to be aware of is the international factor, and the fact that we're all part of a global economy. We've swung a long way from a free market and the idea that we have one market where we're kind of going in the opposite direction now. But the fact is, we are still tied together. The money is still flowing. And whether that means that, your business is trading in other markets, or what is happening with other investment from the outside, may not be international, but it could be national. Just where is that money flowing? Does it stop at your borders, or is it circulating? That's very important as well. So those are some of the things that I would mention, just the basics of prosperity. So when we look at all of the data that we have here, we have to say that fundamentals are within this region. For the most part, they're very, very strong. So that question that Alex, we just asked was critical. What does optimal growth look like? If you have the fundamentals for prosperity, are you interested in leveraging that or not? Or are you interested in managing that and toward what end? That's what our strategy has to figure out. Does that make sense?
So just by way of wrapping up the conversation then, and we appreciate all of the feedback, like I mentioned, we're really sort of just getting into these initial on the ground conversations. So we have a lot more interviews to do, some additional data to look into. We'll be at the Go Virginia meeting tomorrow morning. We're looking at potentially a business survey. We've talked with the economic developers from across the region, and I know everyone is at nearly peak survey, it feels like, but having that information, that real-time information was still a need and a desire from the economic developers. So we'll pursue that later on in the summer. And then move on to strategy development and putting pieces together. So you will hear from us again. I'm sure Patrick will keep you updated, but don't hesitate to reach out throughout the course of this process. Dan and I are both available, and we just appreciate the feedback. Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you both, and obviously, Chair Calvin had to head back to his job down in Charlottesville, but I would say is for the commissioners, the interviews and focus groups that we listed there, we sort of targeted to do some in-person group meetings while they were here, and then doing some interviews probably virtually. Any of you that would want to have a one-on-one conversation with them, we can definitely make that happen. I'll probably also be reaching out to you all individually, suggestions for people that we should talk to outside of, preferably on private sector, or some of the people that are, sort of community leaders that may not be engaged through our regular process here in Virginia as well. So, Vice Chair Pointer, I'm going to turn it over to you. The last item for business is roundtable. So,
well, we'll go ahead and start. And I'll just start on my right and go around. So Janelle can talk about herself, or she can talk about Fauquier County, but this is an informal thing. It's a lot of fun. Just everybody goes around and talks about their neck of the woods. And we're glad to hear, because a lot of things that I hear here kind of catch my attention. I'll flip over to go to Mountain Day in Madison or something, or I'll go this place to the other, because I enjoy utilizing the region for day trips and things. And then it's the business aspect. If you're had trouble getting through your budget, or you've got a big new capital development you want to highlight, it's not a touristy thing, but it's interesting to us because we're a bunch of nerds in that area, So whatever you want to chat about.
The pressure is real.
I was trying to go the other way. I was trying to say whatever.
You're being a gentleman, ladies first.
Well, nice being here today. I will prepare for our next meeting and have some current events, as well as maybe some areas of opportunities that we might need your help with.
Sure.
So thank you.
Great. Culpepper, I think the major item of the last board meeting was we delayed a data center approval for 30 days. I believe it will be, things have been smoothed out. We're going to approve the rezoning in a week or so. Outside of that, pretty smooth and a good summer.
So Rick Eplin from down Remington. We on one side, we continue to have a first Saturday, and had one coming up for July and August, the remaining two. Local new restaurant in town, Craft and Crust. They're the ones that are hosting it, putting it together. So far, they've had good results, a lot of participation. Close off Main Street, that sort of thing. We don't own our own street, so we have to coordinate that with VDOT, things like that, but.
Is there music with you?
Yes, the restaurant actually, had two different bands so far. They picked the entertainment, they sponsor it and all that, so it's really been a big big thing for the folks, especially in town. So that's that, the VHCD, revitalization work that we're doing, the management team, has kicked off having some meetings. The initial 50K grant. Basically underway, and that's to bring on board an engineering firm. We can start looking at what we're going to do. The council itself recently passed. So the initial step or the initial area of the town that they wanted to look at, the work that began was for James Madison, which runs, anybody's familiar with the town, sort of runs directly almost through the middle of the town, as opposed to starting directly on the original Main Street. So we'll see how that goes, but probably in the next 6 or 8 months, I would imagine the study will occur. So that's going on, which is large. It's huge for the town. And then eventually, once we get a plan, some fundamentals and a plan together for that, there is welcome funding that's sitting there that can talk about to support some of these projects. So I think a lot of people are excited to see what happens. Then on the longer term, every year the annual fall festival thing is actually the people who started paying that. That's October 15th. So well, that's what's going on.
That's a good day. Theirs is October 7th for our fall festival. Well, let me ask you something without getting into the weeds here, because it takes a while to get around the table, but just to touch on it. Are y'all utilizing the river in any way that runs near you, the festivals or tourism or any sort of?
So the river access, which, I guess still current or outgoing supervisor for the district there, Chris Butler, is pretty instrumental in getting that river access established. Yeah, the promotion of that and being part of trying to draw people into that area.
So do you have a egress and do you have a trip in mind with that access? Because once you get in the river, you tend to float.
Yeah.
Go downstream.
So I think on the well, I should say on the upper end,
Right.
sort of coming out of the river at that point. And there was the county, there's a park area there, and then up the river in the county, right?
Okay.
To go in. So yeah, so that was sort of that was the goal eventually, was to make.
Arrive there hungry and needing supplies and gas and.
Yeah, it's, some resources for when you get there.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll check that out, get my little canoe. And that was one thing. Thank you.
Jonathan Weekly with Madison County. Happy to report, we were finally able to nail down and get approved the last radio tower site, so that Etland site. Public, first time around, they just where they didn't like it. Gave us some names to talk to in the community, and so it's just one of those rare times you like to take, as whether you're elected officials or not, that community comes together, county goes explores some of those options in your land on it. So we welcome. We want to have some further conversation offline. We'd love to talk Rappahannock County. I believe Superintendent Kenny with the park has maybe started to show some interest. So looking up for, that's obviously for emergency communications, but it will be constructed to co-locate telecom companies if they so wish, which is another need up in that area that borders our counties. Reassessment, we just awarded that contract, so that'll begin. They'll do some of their work in the fall, and that'll go through a whole another year. Be interested to see what our rates will be at the end of that cycle. We are in the middle of our comprehensive plan, and thanks to Patrick, and I didn't see Miss Little today, but Jennifer Little, they've been instrumental in helping us get through that process. I think sometimes you talked about surveys earlier. I've seen some of the community group has some thoughts of surveys. So we're going to keep plugging along. We don't want to derail. We don't want to be in our next comprehensive plan cycle before we finish this one, but we are thankful for the planning efforts. In small rural counties, it's hard to do that alone, so it's good to have partners, Patrick, for things we move in again. RSA, Rappahannock Service Authority, that was a three-county member, Water and Sewer Authority, that is now a two-member. Orange and Madison County are the remaining two. Greene County did receive FCC approval to exit, and I know they're looking to do other things such as probably construct a new water facility and maybe an impoundment. So right now, Madison County and Orange counties have a memorandum of agreement to stick together. I'd like to try to work on maybe a longer term. We'll see if they're willing to do so, but certainly we have some upgrades at our facilities in Madison. Solar, well, it's been around for a while in other counties. I think we're on round 3 of the same project. Not sure where it's going to go. There's still a lot of data that comes with that. Of course, I think the state MIPINs that kind of limit you on either what exemptions you start automatically if you choose M&T or your revenue share model. But certainly it'd be interesting to see if that comes from recommendation through our planning commission, which I think they have the votes to get it as a recommendation. I do not know what the outcome will be when it hits the board of supervisors. So stay tuned for that. That is planned or proposed on Route 29. Not a lot. I think, you know, for maybe some of you do on 29, but I'm sure you've heard of Yoder's Market. It's right beside Yoder's Market. So pristine area for business. It would require a rezone. It's a 91-acre site, I think, to which with all the buffers and so forth, it would be condensed down to about a 61-acre site for solar. That's really some of the things we have going on, and eventually I hope to report we'll have our EMS renovation underway, but we're still working on the scope of work and what that'll look like. So it's Madison County.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, Warrenton once again has some interesting items to report. We just finally approved our budget. Some of you in this room get at it a little bit more efficiently than we do. We approved a 10% across the board increase for all employees after a study that we did where we compared ourselves to 7 to 8 other sister towns and decided that we wanted to pinpoint the median or 50%, half above, half below. That is going into effect. One of the more pronounced changes, and it's only now in the future, is that if you look pre-COVID at our CIP, we only had an aggregate of 54. We're a town, mind you. We're not in the billions of dollars. At $54 million, well, it's tripled, and partly to $150 million over the next 6 years, which will have put significant pressure on various revenue requirements. And one of the reasons is that, and this is probably a warning and something that strong towns always advises about, but we've decided that our water and sewer plant basically needs to be rebuilt. And it has not, it had managed to hold itself together and still does quite well, but some of the critical areas need to be addressed. And so there's a sequential plan over the next 6 years to essentially bring it into the modern world. And one of the reasons is, and this is something that we discovered, is it depends on who you employ. We've got a wonderful new guy who's been in Winchester, and he took a look at the plant and started beating the drum. I said, "You guys have got to more look at this," and we have. And it's something that we have needed to address and probably should have addressed in the past. And these are the kind of things you think about when you talk about economic development. Do you have the capacity and the capability of even doing it? VDOT is now really starting to get engaged in our major Broadview Avenue program, and so that'll be, we hope, a real benefit, but it's going to be a mess while they're at it. And they are starting to pave throughout the town. VDOT has come in and even today, my street now, I'll have them in front of my house shortly. We finally distributed our final ARPA funds. We had some conversation about where it should go. We have, and finally, it may hit the press, it may not hit the press, but we did have a free speech issue, and these are things that affect all municipalities, where we had a vigil, Black Lives Matter vigil that had staked out a location, and I represent 3 of the Black communities, so I'm very familiar with their views, and I support them. But they had staked out the central public forum in town across from the courthouse for 3 years. And they met there every Saturday at 10:45 for 45 minutes, every Saturday after another. And so after about the 150th vigil, people started saying, well, maybe they were moving around town a little bit. Go somewhere else, show a little distribution of your message rather than just simply. And so the town decided to move them to Eva Walker Park, which is a park dedicated to Eva Walker, who's a wonderful and historic Black figure in the county and in the town. And they are upset about that because they think they should be able to stay at the courthouse. So that's something we'll be looking at, but all communities will face this at some point or another, or already have. And we'll see if we can come up with a resolution. Thank you.
How did you fund the 10% increase across the board?
Well, through a combination of things, we actually did not need to increase taxes. What they did, it was based on assumption, and some of us thought it was probably a little optimistic.
That's wrong.
On our various revenue streams, particularly our meals taxes, for example.
I've heard that before.
And we were concerned that this a little aggressive, and some of us wanted to distribute the increase over 2 years.
Should be continued next June.
Yeah, that's right, exactly.
Thanks.
Fairly quiet so far this summer in Culpeper, knock on wood, but the one thing I would mention is we've been spending a lot of time working on developing some revenue sharing applications, which will be some major improvements to some of our existing secondary roads. And Culpeper County has a long history of using revenue sharing. We used to use it on trailblazing and new connections for roads that weren't there. And we used it for many years paving gravel roads. And now we're going to start trying to repair some of our infrastructure on our collector roads. So Public Works Committee has spent many months on that, which Mr. Underwood is the chairman of, and we'll see how that's received by VDOT, I guess.
Is this repairing or changing the level of payment, or repairing the existing, or what are you doing?
It's taking narrow roads that have no shoulders and have bad curves, and basically just trying to make them safe.
Gotcha.
Beyond state of good repair.
Correct.
On revenue sharing, I would say that we've now picked it up where we maintain our roads. It's been delayed for since 21 or 22, there was no revenue sharing. Now it's come back in, and we'll be doing 2 years at the same time.
Town of Orange.
Yeah, the town.
Got some new people.
I'm sorry. But we will be trying to pick up 2 years at once. We have a numerous amount of projects that's coming up. I would say that our budget was approved. We did 5%, 5.5% for anybody that was below $20 an hour. That's what we've done the last couple of times. We've had music in the park, which was 4 Thursdays. First one was held with AP Project. I understand it was very good. The second one was delayed because of rain, but they're looking at another date now. Other things that we've done is we've had a numerous amount of contracts we've had to renew and come up with the RSAs, as well as ODAs. It's Orange Downtown Alliance. With RSA, one of the biggest things was they supplied water to the Route 20 out at the airport in the county, not in the town, through a well system. And we will be picking that up and providing that water now. But not, they will still have it. We just sell it to them in bulk and then where it goes. We have the 100 homes, Round Hill Meadows. It's moving along pretty good. It started out gangbusters, interest rates went up, it dropped down, it's starting to come back now. But the biggest thing that we've got has been the use of our ARPA funds. We have a 110-year-old standpipe in town that provides water pressure. Throughout the night when we shut the plant down. We have to replace that, so we were utilizing our ARPA funds for that. And we've already got a bid out. We had talked to VDH early on, and they said, we will send you some money, offered us 400,000 of their ARPA funds. And we applied for it, but they said, well, people changed, first of all. Another one said, well, you're in your engineering phase, and we're looking for people that are ready to construct. So when we got put the bid out, we're in the construction phase, it's been manufactured now. So we said, well, let's try again. We tried again, and hoping to get maybe $200,000 from them this time. They gave us 2.7 million. That was just Friday. And that's gonna cover the whole standpipe for us, so we're in pretty good mood.
Similar size, Greg, similar size.
Same size, it's
Same
about,
size.
it's we were going to build a 12 foot bigger. Okay, so that the Macon Road tank would equalize. Right. Didn't have to do that. All we had to do was change the level at which we keep it inside. Okay. For years, we struggled with that, and it took about 2 minutes to fix it.
Still gonna have a place for the Christmas star on top.
Christmas star will
Yeah,
be,
orange.
the Christmas star will be there. That was the first criteria.
Okay.
It will be there. Be a new one.
It's always felt like the Christmas star when you're in the area. I mean, it's way up there, and it's impressive. Thank you.
Cheryl Yow with the Town of Madison. And like Warrenton, we just approved our budget and have finished that. We have been working with Patrick and Jennifer Little here at the RRRC. And we're in the process of working on some grant applications and things for our town. Our town, as far as I've gone back, I've only been there 2 years, but as far as I've gone back, I don't think there's ever been any change in our town. So we are applying for some grants to get a planning grant to bring an engineer in and figure out, we have stormwater issues. We have sidewalk issues, and people are walking from a daycare to somewhere else, and they're physically have the children in the streets and strollers and things because we don't have sidewalks for them.
They put in miles of new sidewalks down Main Street about 8-10 years ago.
Yeah, but it doesn't go up on the other
Right,
end, so
right.
they're trying to extend a little bit up to the learning center and things in hopes that one day it would go up to the low income housing where those people would be able to, who can't get to Food Line, would be able to go to the Dollar General store and things and walk on the street safely back. But that part is down the road. But we have sidewalk issues we want to do, and it's all types of things. In the next 30 days, we'll be sending out a letter to all the town residents, since we only have a few hundred. We would send that, we're going to be sending out letters, and that was one of the recommendations we had, to find out some of the things that the town people would like to see that maybe we haven't thought of. So we're getting ready to spend the last of our ARPA funds. And then we have some blighted property in the town that 30 people own, so nobody can buy it or sell it because they won't do. So we're in the process of working on some of that to see if we can get something done with those properties and either acquire them or, get somebody to acquire them that could just take the blight out of the town.
I want to have conversations with you about that as y'all work through that.
I'm sure. So, our biggest goal is with the grants and things is to bring tourism in. Our town's very tiny. We only have certain income, the mills tax and just the real estate taxes is basically our, only income that we have. So with that, we want to be able to bring in more restaurants and businesses that are closed down, to bring in people, give people some enticement to be able to come to the town. And if they're coming to an event or something on the library lawn or wherever it may be, they go to dinner and spend money in the town. So ours, I know everybody else spoke about all the stuff they do, but our town is so tiny and is stuck wherever they've been for the last 40 years. So we're trying to work on things to improve and start bringing the town back to life.
Well, it's gotta be the longest main street and number of businesses for the number of citizens in the state. When you're riding down Main Street in Madison, you would think there's 2,000 people that live in Madison, till you realize there's no depth of housing there. But you would think the street would be a fifth that length if it was as small with the number of people. Is there any place developments and neighborhoods can be developed in Madison?
Not in the town. There's very few pieces of empty property.
Well, the county will work with you to expand what the limits.
We're gonna work through RRRC. There are some buildable lots that are behind, not as much as in Warrenton there, where there's some houses behind others. But, it comes back to the utilities and some of that. I think there's someone interested in restoring or coming into the Huntington Hotel, but it comes back to service availability, so.
Well, you talk about the problems, and I'm glad you've identified them, but as everybody knows, Madison's a beautiful place, and you've got that, it's a special place.
It is, and one day when all the overhead cables and all the eyesores are done, we just have to take it one step at a time, and we've started. So hopefully we'll get something and be able to do just one little piece here and
So
there.
you're already looking past the time of overhead cables being gone. I am too, but I think it's not gonna be in my lifetime in Gordonsville. So I'm telling my children to take up the battle cry after I'm gone, but removing some is a challenge. Removing all is beyond a challenge.
You need to put a VDH bent on it, get some money.
That's exciting stuff.
Chris Ively, Town of Culpeper. We're kind of all hands on deck right now, getting ready for the 4th of July. So pretty much an all-day event from 5K in the morning to car show, patriotic presentation, bunch of other things. And,
Where's the Senator Rams? Chris, where is it?
Davis
Davis
Street's
Street.
where the car show will be. The 5K will start at the Baptist Church, and it's, I don't know exactly the route. We have to modify it because of the work over on 522. The fireworks at the end of the day will be at Rockwater Park. So Rockwater Park will be closed down at the end of the day. I know the Methodist Church is, I think, since it becomes a lot of people up there, I think they're going to capitalize up on that and have some food trucks and stuff up there, I understand, and make a little revenue off of it as well. So it's
Might have to stop over there.
all day event for that. I've talked to you about the construction projects that we've been doing before. They're just continuing on. I would say one of the things that we're keeping a close eye on is the groundwater table and the levels and the water in the Lake Culpeper now. That has changed from Lake Pelham to Lake Culpeper, if you hadn't heard. But this is probably the driest year I've seen. I mean, we've seen some rain here recently, so you say, oh, everything's great, but not really. Groundwater tables are lower than I've ever seen. This is the first time I've seen where our wastewater flow is less than our drinking water flow, which means we have zero infiltration. If anything, we got exfiltration. So that's if there is
we're
no
used to
water in the
August
ground.
and July being like this.
Yeah.
Not May and June.
Yeah, we saw the water's flowing over our reservoir now, but it was 3 or 4 inches under a few weeks ago. And I always said if water's overflowing by the 4th of July, we're probably okay with it. It started getting puny a long time ago. And last year we had lower than normal rain. So we're pretty lucky now compared to our last time we have a drought, because now we have enough wells that we can go 100% on well water or surface water. we're doing about 50-50 now, but, we're keeping an eye on our groundwater, monitoring for our wells as well as the surface water, so. You never know. A good hurricane could change things, but, and they.
And it
saying this
typically does
could be
in
a
September, but that's a
high
ways away.
It could be, yeah, unless you get some.
Yeah.
So I would just say, put that on your radar and look at your water supplies and water levels in your wells and stuff.
That harkens back to 2001 when our council was meeting at 7 o'clock every morning, deciding what we were going to do that week. Where we're going to all get gallon jugs and go over to the Culpeper Lakes and fill them up and go back to Gordonsville. Orange and Gordonsville was a poster child around the state during that drought. And the river, you could walk across the river. You probably get the bottom of your feet wet, but you wouldn't get your ankles wet. And that's a river. So it was all gone then. And so that's scary. I'll keep my eyes on the groundwater.
Chris, did y'all started the broke down the commuter lot by the depot?
By the depot, we have it prepared now for asphalt and concrete, and we put it on hold. We did that internally. Gary Wise did that before he retired.
Okay.
I told him he couldn't retire.
So let's complete.
So he actually stayed an extra, he had to extend his retirement a month so he could finish that. Now we're waiting on the pedestrian bridge to be done. We have steel on order for that. We'll be issuing a notice to proceed later on in July. All of the contracts already awarded. We just kind of gave them an extended notice to proceed to help them with some of their supply chain issues. So once that's done, then we'll get our contractors to go back and do the asphalt and concrete. In the meantime, as soon as I won't say what I was gonna say, but anyhow, we're going to put an amphitheater down there on the residual property as well, right beside the National Cemetery. And actually, I built a mock form, and the guys are going to take the mock form and build that internally. After we lost.
Is that where you would do concerts and things around the courthouse or something?
We'll do some concerts there. I doubt Third Thursday would move over there, but it gives us a lot more parking. It gives us a lot more flexibility because we don't have to close roads or anything to do that. And the National Cemetery is very excited about it because it could help for some of their events. And we actually have a walking trail that will go from that parking lot by the amphitheater into the National Cemetery, so they can also use it for parking for their.
So is that adjacent or part of the National Cemetery?
No, it's adjacent. It's
It
adjacent.
was a former hotel, I think.
Yeah, the Waverly Hotel.
I
was
saw her a
there.
couple weeks ago. That's why I piqued my interest.
Waverly Hotel was there and back in the past, so
Okay.
we call that Heritage Park, and we're trying to. It's going to be a lightly, done park, but. The thought being that we would name it Heritage Park and talk about all the heritage from. It was an encampment for, both sides, I think, during the Civil War, and it's right there close to Fishtown, and a lot of the history is associated with that area. So we're trying to mold all of that history together.
Absolutely.
And
Can I ask what your increase was for your what your employees?
we did 7% this year.
We haven't improved
Well, we
our
did-
budget yet.
We did
What happens to you if you
7%
don't
as a
improve your
merit,
budget by June the 30th?
So we do 7% as a merit.
You
so
can't
we're
appropriate.
0 to.
We're gonna do
I
it
think,
tomorrow. We're gonna do it tomorrow
Yeah.
night.
0 to like 12 or something that we did.
Anyway,
I'm gonna be real quick, because I'm the last one. So,
next slide.
oh, you didn't go yet. Well, we got a long time here.
See, I set you up for that purposely, and you didn't let me down.
So nobody mentioned state. We're obviously waiting to see if anything's gonna come out of the state. Didn't sound good yesterday. We've teed up meals and lodging tax increase for after the first quarter of the fiscal year that we can go, no go, depending on whether new revenue comes. We're gonna have to push that advertisement out, and so we'll run parallel with whatever's happening at the state. So we're at 4% now. We're looking to go 6 and 6. if you want to come to a rural Fourth of July fireworks, come out to Benvenue Farm on 4th of July evening. Bring your wallet. It's pretty expensive, but it's a fundraiser for the fire department, so it'll be a good time. Working through, I hope, the end of a classification compensation study. Same group that you used, and we picked up a cooperative contract from when you guys used them like a million years ago. Before the pandemic and screwed everything up, and so we have no classification.
We may pick it up once you're done with it.
Yeah, so we're about ready to do that. I think I told you before, we had some interesting things happen with volunteer fire departments, and so that court case was just heard a couple weeks ago, and circuit court judge sustained our plea and bar, basically stating that the board of supervisors did have the authority to appoint a new board of directors for the volunteer fire company. We'll see if that's appealed or not. That's the law of the land for at least now. And put some fear into the other volunteer fire companies, thinking that they might not have as much control as they thought they did. And we're very adamant that we want them to keep doing what they're doing and do a great job and let us stay out of their business. But if you have multiple years of bad audits and some other issues, then you're probably going to have county talking to.
Actually, I don't have a lot this time, or a lot of things I'm not going to mention, but we did have an issue this year with they say, you know, supply chain and everything else as far as employees and staff and personal issues, but we haven't gotten our audit report yet, which greatly affected the fact that we're approving our budget tomorrow night. Couldn't have been much later, closer to June 30th. But so we'll have done the whole thing without any real data, because we're small enough where our folks in the office, you know, they're not high level enough to give us just below audit level. They're really working with the auditors to give us something other than just printing out journals, you know, transactions. So I've done this 24 years and I've never done it blind. But I've made sure I understand the balance, you know, reconcile balances of all of our checking and all of our liabilities. And I've unofficially created my own balance sheet and worked out the difference. And so I can get comfortable with our standing without all the line items, but it's hard to do a budget without all the line items. And then with all the inflation, it's hard just to do the same old, same old. So with all the changes being presented. So the first 8 years of my career after college, I was with a big public accounting firm in Richmond, and I audited towns. So which helps me get a feel for things. It can't be official, but I can get comfortable. The rest of my counsel has a very difficult time getting comfortable. So I was just wondering, what sort of time frame you guys get your reports? Can y'all remember approximately when you got your?
Oh, we
Just going out.
We get ours before December.
We always have.
Yeah.
But
We were okay this year, although we also use the same auditing company for our fire and rescue company, and it's a year late. We've been squawking and squealing, and now they claim they're going to finish it up when they did next year.
And that's Rappahannock County?
Our 7 volunteer fire companies.
Right, but when did the county get it?
Oh, we got ours on time.
When, like December?
December.
Okay. December?
No issue, yeah.
Because we used the big Roberts, we used the big accounting firm that most people use, you know, localities. When's y'all get yours, Chris?
It's about then, I think, December, January.
Of course, the bigger places, it's required by the end of the year. And I mean, we can get ours in January. It's not technically late, but I think y'all are looking to get yours by the end of the year. And if I got mine in January, I'd be okay in the 1st of February, but we don't have it yet.
Yeah, you're on the naughty list. You're supposed to put it on your website.
Well, they're gonna be on my naughty list. And I'm looking to get a half price audit this year, if not a third. And if not, I'll probably take them to court, because I don't need to pay a big fee for something that's gonna sit in a drawer and was never used. So to be continued, they're hearing it from me, both barrels. But anyway, they made my budget season different than the other 24 years this year. And I normally forgive easily, but this year I won't. So anyway, I'm finished. Anything else anyone wants to go out there before we go ahead and adjourn? Then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor, say aye. See you next time.